The wind that night was not merely cold, it was cruel. It carried whispers of betrayal, of laughter that had once been familiar, now turned to knives. Era wind tore through the rain with bare feet, her thin dress soaked and clinging, the pack's scent still tangled in her hair. Her wolf, small, silver, trembling, whimpered in her mind, begging her to stop. But she couldn't. Not now. Not when her heart still echoed with the words that had damned her. Unmarked, unmated, unwanted. Every footstep was a vow. Never again will I kneel before cruelty. The barn appeared through the storm like a ghost, its roof sagging, doors half rotten, yet somehow waiting, as if it had always been meant for her. She stumbled inside, clutching her sides. The air was warm with old hay, dust, and memory. She sank down in the dark, her body shaking, her tears soundless. The moonlight slipped through the broken boards and painted her skin in pale silver. Her wolf whimpered once, then fell quiet, and when she slept, it was the sleep of the forsaken, deep, dreamless, and deadly still. By dawn the rain had stopped, and 10 wolves lay dead in a perfect circle around her body, their eyes still open, their positions almost reverent, as if they had not been slain but had chosen to die protecting her. Chapter 1. The sound of a dead morning. The first sound she heard was silence, a silence so heavy it felt alive. Era woke to the pale light of dawn slipping through the cracks of the barn. The hay smelled faintly of iron and smoke. Her breath came out uneven, her body still shaking from the cold. Then she saw it, the blood, the fur, the stillness. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She scrambled back, her hands clutching at the hay, her breath catching as realization struck. She recognized their scents. Riven, Jurek, Tala, the scouts from her pack, the ones sent to find her. Her wolf rose within her, frightened, confused. We didn't do this, yet the scent of her own power lingered in the air, faint, sharp, impossible. Outside, the storm had broken. Inside, the world had stopped breathing. That was when the barn door creaked open. Chapter 2. The Man with the Winter Eyes. He stood framed by sunlight, tall, broad-shouldered, his cloak heavy with frost. His hair was dark, his eyes grey like the sea in winter. He did not speak at first. He looked at the dead wolves, then at her, long enough that Era's pulse began to trip over itself. "You did this?" His voice was quiet, steady, and far too calm. She shook her head. "No, I don't know how." He knelt beside one of the bodies, tracing the wound with his fingertips. Clean, swift, there was no suffering. His eyes flicked up to her, unreadable. "That's not the work of an Omega." Era's throat tightened. The word Omega sounded different when he said it. Not cruel, not mocking. Just true. He stood slowly. "You shouldn't stay here. When the others come, they'll smell this blood. I have nowhere to go." He paused, studying her for a long time before speaking again. "My name is Cale Rowan, once Alpha of the Frostborn." Her wolf stirred, whispering recognition. Frostborn, the exiled pack from the north, the cursed line, the Alphas who'd lost their moon blessing. Era hesitated, then whispered, "And now?" "Now," he said softly, "I am no one's Alpha, but I can keep you alive." Chapter 3. Ashwood Cabin. Kyle led her through the forest. The air was sharp, the trees whispering secrets above their heads. They walked for hours, until a cabin appeared in a clearing. Quiet, weathered, lonely. Inside, the scent of cedar and smoke filled the space. A small fire crackled. A carved wooden wolf sat on the mantel, its eyes smooth with age. "This place is safe," he said simply. "It listens before it judges." Days bled into nights. Era helped repair the roof, gathered herbs and fed the fire. Kyle spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried a strange gentleness. the kind forged in loss, not born of kindness. Sometimes she caught him watching her hands as she worked, not with hunger, but with something quieter, something like recognition. At night she'd hear him whisper a name in his sleep, Lyra, and sometimes he'd wake with a sound half between a growl and a prayer. Chapter 4. The Song Beneath Their Skin. The forest began to change around them. The snow melted early. The birds returned before spring. The air hummed when they walked side by side. Era felt it, a rhythm beneath her skin that pulsed whenever Kyle was near. Once, when she brushed past him, her wolf rose, pressing toward his, like two currents meeting in a river that had long been dry. "What are you hiding from?" she asked one evening as they mended a torn cloak. He didn't look up. "The truth, which is, that I killed the woman I loved," Era stilled. The firelight flickered between them, painting his face in gold and shadow. "And now?" His eyes met hers, grey, infinite. "Now I'm afraid I'll do it again." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of every word they didn't say. Chapter 5. When the wolves returned. The pack came again under a moon the colour of rust. They burned the forest behind them, their howls echoing across the frost. Kyle woke first. "They found us." Era's pulse hammered. She could smell them, the same ones who had once been her brothers. Their rage tasted like iron. Kyle turned to her. "Hide. I'll draw them off." She shook her head. "I'm done running." Then the air shifted. Her wolf surged. The same ancient power stirred. Not rage this time, but love. A love that refused to die even when the world demanded it. Light burst from her hands. The fire dimmed. The forest bent as if bowing. When the smoke cleared, the attackers were gone, scattered like ash. Kyle found her kneeling, trembling, her hair silvered by moonlight. He went to her, his voice breaking. "You're not meant for destruction, Era. You're meant for something greater." She looked up, tears cutting through soot. "Then stay with me and teach me how to live." The cabin still stands, deep in the frostwood. Sometimes travelers say they see a light there, soft, silver, flickering through the snow. They say the air smells like pine and promise. They say if you listen closely, you can hear two heartbeats in perfect rhythm, one human, one wolf. And if you follow the tracks in the morning frost, they always lead to the same place, a barn, long forgotten. Chapter 6. The Bond That Burned the Moon. The smoke had thinned by dawn, curling lazily through the broken rafters like ghosts reluctant to leave. The world outside lay hushed. No bird song, no wind, only the faint crackle of embers where the forest had burned itself into memory. Era woke slowly, her body aching as though every bone had been carved from ice. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then she heard it, the sound that tethered her back to life. A heartbeat, not hers, deep, steady. A rhythm that had found its way beneath her skin. Kyle was sitting beside her, his broad frame half shadowed by the light from the ruined window. His hands were wrapped, burned along the edges, but still steady as he stirred the fire back to life. "Don't move yet," he said quietly, without turning. "You lost a lot of strength." Era's throat was raw, her voice a whisper. "How long was I? 3 days. 3 days." She stared at the floorboards, where ash and moonlight mingled in pale silver. "Then, softer, you stayed." He looked at her finally, grey eyes that carried exhaustion and something gentler beneath it. "You didn't think I'd leave you now, did you?" Her lips trembled into a smile she didn't quite feel ready for. "You said you don't keep packs." "I don't," he murmured. "But you're not a pack." "Then what am I?" He didn't answer. But the silence between them said everything. The forest had changed. Even Kyle could sense it. The animals no longer fled from the cabin. They watched, as though guarding. The air shimmered faintly with energy, carrying the scent of rain, though no clouds hung above. Era could feel it too, a pulse under her skin that matched the sound in Kael's chest. Sometimes when he brushed past her, her breath caught, her wolf stirred, wanting to move closer, to complete something she couldn't name. She tried to resist. She failed. One evening, while they repaired the outer wall of the cabin, their hands brushed. Her pulse leapt, wild and sure. Kael froze, jaw tightening, his eyes fixed on the place where their fingers met. "You feel it too," she whispered. He nodded once, almost painfully. "I shouldn't. Why?" "Because when two wolves share a bond not given by the moon, something breaks." He looked at her then, and the weight of it nearly stole her breath. "And it doesn't heal." Era's voice was a whisper. "Then let it break." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had denied, everything that had waited to be spoken. The world seemed to pause, as though holding its breath for them. That night the moon rose low and red, painting the world in amber and shadow. Era couldn't sleep. She slipped outside, barefoot, the forest air cool against her skin. The trees whispered softly, their branches glinting with frost. She stood by the half-frozen stream, her reflection trembling in the water. For the first time she could see it, her eyes, no longer purely silver but threaded with storm grey. Kael's colour. Behind her the cabin door creaked. She didn't turn. "You shouldn't be out here," Kael said, his voice rougher than before, like he was fighting himself. "And you shouldn't follow me," she replied, her words misting in the air. "Era!" Her name in his voice was a prayer and a wound. When he came closer, she could feel his warmth against her back, could hear his heartbeat echoing in her own chest. "What did you do to me?" he murmured. She turned slowly, her eyes searching his. "I think the question is what we did to each other." He reached up, fingers brushing her jaw. His touch was hesitant, reverent, as though she were both salvation and sin. "I can't love you," he whispered. "It would ruin you." She stepped closer. "Then let it ruin me." And when he kissed her, the world changed. The trees bent toward them, their leaves shimmering like glass. The moon flared white, washing the forest in a light that felt alive. For one suspended moment, they weren't Alpha or Omega, cursed or chosen, just two broken souls who had found the same quiet in each other's chaos. The air around them pulsed. A bond, unseen and eternal, settled into the space between their hearts, not moon-given but self-forged. Somewhere deep in the forest, a howl rose, ancient and mournful. It wasn't a warning. It was a recognition. By morning, new tracks circled the cabin. Not enemies, watchers, wolves that neither Kael nor Era recognized, carrying scents of distant lands and forgotten bloodlines. When Era stepped outside, one lingered at the edge of the clearing, its coat black as shadow, its eyes gleaming gold. It bowed its head once, then disappeared into the mist. She turned to Kael, who stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "They've come for the bond," he said quietly. "For us, for what we've made." Era's hand found his. "Then we'll face it together." Kael hesitated, then drew her closer. "Together then, even if the moon burns for it." That night, the sky glowed red again, not with fire, but with a shimmer of awakening magic. Far away, packs stirred in their sleep. Prophecies whispered through bloodlines. And in the frostwood, two hearts beat as one, daring the world to tear them apart. Chapter 7. The wolves who remembered their names. The forest had begun to hum. Not the soft whisper of leaves, but something older, a living resonance beneath the soil, threading through the roots, carrying the low, steady thrum of awakening magic. Kyle heard it first while sharpening his blade by the doorway, though the sound had no rhythm that belonged to the world he knew. His wolf bristled beneath his skin, uneasy, half in warning, half in recognition. Eira was in the clearing, barefooted, the hem of her dress heavy with dew. The morning light traced the faint silver veins that now marked her arms, patterns that shimmered when she breathed, pulsing in time with the heart she now shared with him. "They're close," she said softly, without turning. He laid the blade aside. "You can feel them?" "I don't feel them," she whispered. "I remember them." The first of the strangers stepped into the clearing by noon, a young woman with wild red hair and eyes that mirrored the storm. Behind her came 4 others, a pale, furred male whose scent was salt and wind, a boy no older than 16 with a scar across his neck, an older woman draped in moss-colored cloth, her gaze heavy with wisdom. Each one stopped at the edge of the light, heads bowed slightly, not in submission but in recognition. Kyle tensed. "Who sent you?" The red-haired woman smiled faintly. "No one sends the forgotten Alpha of Ash. We find each other when the moon begins to change." Eira took a step forward. Her pulse quickened as she looked into their eyes. They knew her. Not her face, perhaps, but her presence, as though her soul carried a scent the world had not breathed in centuries. The elder woman spoke, voice like rustling parchment. "The mark of Lunara returns. The old blood walks again." Kyle's jaw tightened. The old blood should have died long ago. The woman's eyes gleamed. And yet here she stands. They stayed that night. The cabin that had once felt too quiet now hummed with murmurs, laughter, stories told in low voices. They spoke of scattered packs hiding. From the council, of alphas who had begun to lose control under the red moon, of omens written in the sky. Eira listened, her fingers unconsciously tracing the table's edge. Every story sounded like a warning wrapped in prophecy. When the others slept, she stepped outside. The moon hung pale above the frostwood, half covered by cloud. Kyle followed, silent until he was near enough that his warmth reached her. "They'll look to you now," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I'm no leader." He studied her profile, the way her eyes held light and shadow both. "You woke power that should have stayed buried. They don't need a leader, they need a reason to believe the curse can end." She turned, and the moonlight caught the shimmer of unshed tears. "And what if it can't?" Kyle's hand found hers. "Then we make something worth breaking for." They didn't see the watcher on the ridge, the black-furred wolf from before, its golden eyes fixed on them. When it turned away, the night itself seemed to move with it. Far to the east, in the stronghold of the council, a bell began to toll. 12 times, one for each ancient pack. The sound rolled across valleys, carrying a message older than words. The bond has been made, the moon will demand its price. By dawn, frost coated the leaves again. The red-haired woman, Lyra, was the first to wake. She looked out over the forest and whispered, "They found us." Eira stepped to the doorway beside Kyle. Through the mist, dozens of shapes moved between the trees, wolves, armored and silent, bearing the sigil of the council's sun. Kyle's breath left him in a single measured sigh. "So it begins." Eira turned to him, the rising light painting her face in gold and silver. "If we run, they'll follow. If we fight, we'll die," he answered. "Then we stand," she said. "Not for the moon, for each other." He looked at her for a long heartbeat, then nodded once. The forest shivered around them. The first rays of sun struck the cabin roof, and when the council wolves emerged from the fog, what they saw were not 2 exiles, but 2 souls bound by something older than destiny. The war for the forgotten bond had begun. Chapter 8. the forest that took their names. The first howl split the dawn like glass. It wasn't from Kyle pack. It came from the fog, from the legion that moved like a living wall through the trees. The ground trembled with their approach. Frost fell from the leaves in shimmering cascades. Inside the cabin, silence settled like a held breath. Lyra's fingers twitched against her dagger. The young boy, Rowan, clutched the wooden charm around his neck, a talisman carved by a mother he barely remembered. Even the fire seemed afraid to crackle. Eira stood by the window, her reflection ghosting across the frost. "They'll burn everything," she whispered. "They'll burn us." Kyle's voice came low, steady. "Not if the forest takes us first." She turned to him. "You mean to run?" He met her gaze, a storm within restraint. "Not run, disappear." They fled before the sun could rise fully. The wolves of the council followed, silent but swift, their breath fogging the air with hunger and purpose. Kyle led the way through the frostwood, his hand brushing the trees as though they could hear him. In a way, they could. Eira felt the forest shift. The roots moved beneath her feet like veins awakening, branches bowing as though whispering her name. The deeper they went, the darker it grew, until even the morning lost its light. Lyra hissed from behind, "This is the shadow veil. No one crosses it and returns." Kyle didn't look back. "That's why they'll stop at its edge." Eira's heart pounded. "And if they don't?" He glanced over his shoulder, eyes catching a glint of silver light. "Then it'll remember them too." Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. The forest warped time. The trees grew taller, older, their bark veined with faint blue light. Every breath they took came back colder, carrying whispers that had no source. Then Eira heard it, a voice within the wind, not words, not sound, a memory. "You belong to the moon, child of lost light." She stopped dead, clutching her chest. Kyle spun to her, his hand firm on her shoulder. "Eira, it knows me," she gasped. "It's speaking, it remembers." Before Kyle could answer, the ground shuddered. From the mist ahead, figures began to appear. Translucent wolves, their bodies woven from moonlight and shadow, their eyes pale as morning stars. Rowan stumbled back. "Ghosts," he breathed. "The ones who never crossed the veil." Kyle's grip on his blade tightened. "Not ghosts, guardians." The lead spirit stepped forward, towering and silent. Its voice came from everywhere at once. "You carry the mark. You carry the broken vow." Eira stepped closer, trembling, but unafraid. "Whose vow?" "The vow your blood once made and broke." Kyle's heart clenched. He'd always known there was more to her than exile and sorrow, that her silence hid something older, deeper. But this was prophecy come alive. The spirit turned its gaze toward him. "And you, Alpha of Ash, why stand beside the Cursed One?" Kyle's voice came rough, unyielding. "Because the Cursed One is mine." The air rippled. The spirits recoiled, not in anger but in recognition. The forest pulsed once like a heart remembering its beat. Then, in a blur of white light, the ghosts vanished. Only their whisper remained. To save her, she must be lost again. By nightfall, the group found shelter beneath the ancient stone arch of a ruin swallowed by vines. Eira sat apart, her back against the moss-covered wall, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the moon above. Kyle approached quietly, kneeling beside her. "You heard what it said," she murmured. "Lost again. What if it means I have to leave?" He hesitated, fingers brushing hers. "Then I'll follow you into whatever darkness it takes." Her breath caught, her chest tightening with that terrible, beautiful ache, the kind that felt like both promise and farewell. "Kyle," she whispered, "if I become what they fear." He cut her off softly. "Then I'll remind you who you are, The silence that followed was filled with more than words could carry. The sound of two hearts standing at the edge of something vast, inevitable and eternal. Above them, the moon slipped behind the clouds. The forest exhaled, its shadows deepening. And far away, beneath the council's tower, a silver mirror cracked from within. The war between memory and destiny had only just begun. Chapter 9. The night the moon forgot its light. The storm began without warning. No wind, no thunder, only a vast stillness, as though the sky itself had been emptied of sound. Then the first drop of rain struck the earth like a heartbeat. Era awoke in the ruins, her skin damp with dew and moonlight. Kyle lay beside her, his arm heavy across her waist, his breathing deep but restless. For a moment she watched him, the soft crease between his brows, the faint tremor in his jaw, even in sleep, as though fighting battles the night refused to end. Then the whisper came again, that same voice, ancient and tender as sorrow. Child of the forgotten moon, your blood remembers what your mind denies. She rose quietly, stepping barefoot into the rain. The ruins bled silver where water touched stone. The forest hummed around her, not hostile now, but expectant. Watching. Behind her, Kyle stirred. "Era!" His voice was hoarse, thick with sleep and unease. She didn't turn. "It's again." He was on his feet before the words had finished leaving her mouth. "Where?" "Everywhere," she whispered. "The air, the rain. It's calling me by name, but not the one I know." The forest exhaled. The rain slowed. And in the clearing before her, the mist began to shape itself into a figure, human at first, then wolf, then both. Kyle's instincts surged, every muscle tensing, but Era lifted a trembling hand. "Don't," she breathed. "I know her." From the haze stepped a woman draped in silver light. Not divine, but wild, like the moon-given flesh. Her eyes were soft as grief, and in her smile lingered centuries of unspoken apology. "You carry my name," the spirit said. "I am the one you were born to remember, and to end." Era's heart hammered in her chest. "Who are you?" The spirit's gaze flicked toward Kyle. "Once I was the first mate to the Alpha of Shadows, the one who defied the moon and brought the curse upon our kind." Kyle froze. "The story, it's real?" "Stories are the only things that survive us," the woman replied. "And you, Alpha of Ash, are the final thread of that story's punishment." The rain shimmered like falling glass around them. Era's voice trembled. "You said I must be lost again. Why?" The spirit stepped closer, close enough that her light cast pale reflections across Era's face. "Because every curse must return to its beginning before it can be broken. You carry my echo, my sin. You must walk into the place where it was born." Kyle's hand closed around Era's wrist. "If she goes, I go." The spirit regarded him, sorrow flickering in her eyes. "Then one of you will not return." The world seemed to still. The rain stopped mid-fall, droplets hanging suspended in the air. Then the spirit lifted her hand. The silver light dimmed, her form beginning to unravel like mist at dawn. "Follow the wolf that has no shadow," she whispered, voice fading into the wind. "It waits where the moon forgot to rise." And she was gone. The silence left behind was heavy, unbearable. Era turned to Kyle, but there were no words left to bridge the terror that had taken root between them. "She said one of us won't return," she murmured. Kyle met her eyes, steady, fierce, unflinching. "Then let it be me." Her heart broke a little at that. "No," she whispered. "If I lose you, I'll never find my way back." He smiled faintly, a weary, mortal thing. "You already found it once." Then, as if summoned by their fear, The forest shifted. A distant howl, deep, mournful and strange, cut through the night. It was unlike any sound they'd ever heard. "The wolf with no shadow," Kyle said softly. Era nodded. "It's waiting." He took her hand. "Then we go. Together." They walked until dawn tried and failed to break through the fog. The trees gave way to a clearing they'd never seen before. A hollow lake of black water, perfectly still, perfectly wrong. No moon reflected in it, no stars. Era's chest tightened. "This is where the light dies." Kyle stepped forward, the mist curling around his boots. "Or where it's reborn." But before he could take another step, the surface of the lake rippled, and from beneath, a pair of golden eyes opened. The wolf rose, vast and spectral, its fur so dark it seemed to swallow the world around it. It had no reflection, no shadow, as though it existed outside of light itself. Era felt her pulse falter. The air turned cold enough to freeze her tears. The wolf's voice filled her mind. "You are the child of her regret. Come and end it." Kyle drew his blade. "You'll have to go through me first." But Era touched his hand. "No, Kyle, this is what I was born for." Her fingers brushed his cheek. Soft, final, infinite. And then she stepped toward the water. The lake began to glow, faintly, mournfully, as if remembering the moon it had once mirrored. And in that pale, impossible light, Era walked into her fate. Final chapter, the dawn that remembered her name. The lake swallowed her without a sound. No splash, no ripple, only the faint quiver of light that trembled across the surface before sinking into stillness. Kyle fell to his knees at the water's edge, hands trembling against the cold black glass. The silence that followed was so vast it felt alive, as though the world itself were holding its breath. "Era!" he shouted into the dark. His voice broke the sky open, but only the echo came back, warped, distant, and heartbreakingly soft. Inside the lake, the water did not drown her. It embraced her, cool, ancient, filled with whispers older than the world. Shapes moved in the depths, wolves of light and shadow, each carrying fragments of faces of lives once lived. Era floated between them, her breath steady, her body weightless. The wolf with no shadow appeared before her, enormous, unearthly, eyes like burning gold in the abyss. "Do you understand now?" it asked. Her voice was barely a breath. "That I am her? You are what she could not forgive," the wolf replied. "You are her sorrow reborn, but you can end what she began." Era closed her eyes. Memories, not hers yet painfully hers, flooded her. A woman standing beneath a red moon, her hands drenched in light. A man with Kyle's face dying to save her. A vow whispered to the stars. "I'll return when the moon forgets my name." Tears burned behind her lids. "If I end her, I end myself, or you begin again." The wolf lowered its head, pressing its muzzle to her chest. Pain exploded, 1,000 heartbeats breaking at once. Light surged from her body, flooding the depths in white fire. Above the lake, Kyle saw the glow erupt, a column of silver tearing the clouds apart. The ground shuddered, trees bowing under invisible weight. Then silence again. When the light faded, the lake was no longer black. It was clear, so clear he could see the bottom for the first time. And there she was, Era rising from the water, her dress clinging to her like smoke, her eyes no longer pale silver but deep, luminous gold, alive with warmth. Kyle ran to her, stumbling through the shallows, arms reaching before reason could stop him. He caught her against his chest, half laughing, half breaking. "You came back," he whispered. She smiled weakly, brushing her fingers across his jaw. "No, We came back. The dawn broke fully then, pale light spilling across the clearing. For the first time in centuries, the sun touched the lake, and it did not turn away. Later, as the others found them, Lyra, Rowan, the scattered remnants of Kyle's pack, the forest seemed to breathe easier. No ghosts, no whispers, only the living. Rowan knelt beside Eira, awe wide in his eyes. "Is it over?" Eira glanced at the horizon where the sun rose through a thin veil of mist. "Curses don't end. They sleep." Kyle took her hand. "Then let them sleep long enough for us to live." She looked up at him, at the man who had walked through every shadow beside her, and for the first time the word home meant something real. Epilogue. Years later they would speak of the lake that forgot its moon, of the two figures who walked into it and returned as one. Some said they were blessed, others whispered they were still cursed. But those who saw them, truly saw them, knew the truth, that love was never about breaking curses, it was about surviving them,